Hi guys, Callum from the Bushcraft Cave here. Welcome to another video. We're mid-October at the moment, so I've come to quite a high point in Winchester, which is in the south of the UK, to look for some sloes, which are the fruit of the blackthorn tree. I've come to this particular point because I know that it receives an awful lot of sunlight, so I'm hoping there's going to be a really good crop of sloes. I've had a look around on the way up here and I've seen thousands. I'll show you some methods in a bit just of how to check if they're ripe or not. But what we'll do now is we'll focus in on the blackthorn, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about the tree identification and how to tell if the fruit is ripe or not. Okay guys, I've stopped next to this blackthorn tree here. This is a pretty typical example. So just before we actually talk about the sloes, I thought we could actually go through some of the tree identification, because once you've collected sloes once or twice, you'll be very familiar with them. But for the first time, just to make sure there's no confusion, let's just make sure that our tree ID is 100% nailed on. There's not actually too many things you can confuse sloes with. There's a small cherry, wild cherry, which can be a little bit confusing, I guess, but apart from that, there's not really a huge amount out there. But this is the blackthorn. Prunus spinosa is the botanical name for this one. It's a native tree to the UK and Europe. I say it's a tree. You typically see it as a shrub in a hedgerow. So they can, if they are left to grow as a tree, they can go up to 5, 6, 7 meters high. But typically you'll see them laid in hedgerows, and they can be used to keep to protect cattle, to keep them in a certain area, or some people use them on the curtilage of their property to stop intruders from coming in. Trust me, you would not want to be running through one of these. I can tell you that 100% right now. But if we just look at the leaf to start with, the leaves are quite distinctive on the blackthorn. So they're long, thin, oval-shaped leaves with serration on the outside, on both sides, going right up to the tip. So that's long, thin, oval-shaped leaves with serration on both sides, going right up to the tip. So it's quite easy to identify it using that. There's not a million other trees that look like that. So there's only a few. So that's a really good starter. The next one is, it's called the blackthorn because the bark goes very, very dark brown, and it does look like a black colour. And it's obviously got these thorns on here, which can be up to 1 inch long. I'll show you an example here. So if you can see the thorns on here, the sharp thorns up to 1 inch long, and you can also identify the leaf, then you know you're onto a winner. I guess the most distinguishing feature though would actually be the sloe itself, the sloe berry. Technically it's not a berry, it is actually a drupe. It's a bad habit I've got into, calling them berries. A drupe is any fruit of a tree with a fleshy outer layer which protects the seed or the kernel on the inside there. I'll just show you an example. Just grab one from over here very quickly. So this is a typical example of a sloe. This is actually a really good example. You can see that there's this. It's a very distinctive colour. It's a dark blue, black colour. When you rub it, the blue does kind of come off there a little bit. But it's and it's about the size of a marble. So it's quite a sizable drupe there. And this is what we're after. So the perfect time to get these is between August to November. We're in mid-October now, and where I am is quite high up. So and these particular blackthorn trees have been receiving lots and lots of light. So there should be I can see already the crop is looking really quite healthy. And because they weigh so much, because of the size of them, you don't even need a lot. We need 450 grams for this recipe we're doing for sloe gin. We're making a litre, so we'll need about 450 grams. But yeah, there you are. So that's a sloe. That's what you're looking for. And as I say, once you've found them once or twice, going forward, you really will find them quite easy to identify. It's just the first few times. It's really important to make sure your ID is nailed on. And just to be 100% sure on the safe side of things, if you give it a squeeze to tell if it's ripe, effectively think of it as like a plum. They actually look like small plum trees anyway, but think of it like a plum. So if you squeeze it in your finger and it feels like a stone, it's obviously not going to be ready. But if it's slightly soft but it still retains that firmness, then you know you're in business. And you only need to check a few. You don't need to check them all to know if the crop's ready. So check a few. If they're soft but retaining that firmness, then you know you're good to go, and you can start gathering the quantity you need. Other good examples of drupes, actually, just whilst we're on that subject, because it's actually quite interesting. Things like peaches, plums, olives, cherries, even haws from the hawthorn tree are a really good example of other drupes. So a lot of people call them berries. I'm guilty of that one, but they are technically known as drupes. So we're going to gather 450 grams because that's the amount we need to make our sloe gin recipe. Okay guys, well I think we're done here today. I've got a good bag full here. I would say easily 500 grams. When you're collecting sloes, it's always better to have more than less, because no doubt you'll discard some anyway. Plus, you know, if you haven't got enough, you've just got to come back and get some more. So it's always better to have more than less. The rain's starting to set in now, and I've got a few miles to walk back home. So I'm going to head off. So it's been a really enjoyable day today. It's got some really great walking done. You have to look to find these. You have to search hard. He who searches hardest shall be rewarded, because I walked around for about an hour and all the blackthorn trees have been stripped already, so people have beaten me to it. So I had to come right off the beaten track to find this this patch here where there's several blackthorn trees which are completely untouched. So I'll leave these for the next person who comes along. There's quite a few left here. Okay, so I've just got back home. I put all the sloes in the colander, and I've given them a really good rinse under the cold water tap for a couple of minutes. What I'm going to do now though is I'm going to soak them in some water. So just get a slightly bigger saucepan, fill it up with some water, and allow them to soak for about 10 minutes. Once that's been completed, I'll put them into a bag and then I'll place them in the freezer overnight. The whole reason of placing the sloes in the freezer is because they'll expand very slightly when they're frozen, and it will rupture the outer skin, and this will allow the sloes to mix much more easily with the gin when we mix them tomorrow. So I'm just going to fill this up with a bit of water and allow them to soak. Trick is here not to make it overfill. And that should be perfect. Okay, so we're on day 2 of making our sloe gin. So this is the day we're going to get everything ready and put the bottles away. I've checked the sloes this morning and they're looking great. They're frozen solid and they're a little bit split on the outside where they've expanded when they've frozen, which is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. A couple of things you're going to need to have to hand just to make everything a little bit easier, so you're not rushing around looking for it. You need a set of weighing scales, a funnel. I've got a couple of bowls here for measuring. You're obviously going to need your gin, your caster sugar, and the bottles or the jars that you're going to be using to actually put the sloe gin in. So these jars this morning, I've sterilised them. So I've put boiling water inside, and I've popped them in the oven for 10 minutes. So these are completely sterilised, and they're just about cool now. They're just about cool enough to handle. So the recipe we're going to be using is 1 litre of good quality gin. If you use bad quality gin, you're going to get bad sloe gin. The sloes won't mask the flavour of the gin. They actually enhance it, and they will bring out the quality or lack thereof of the gin you're using. So try and use a quality gin. Don't pick up the paint stripper for £5 per litre. Get some good stuff. This is Bombay, which is perfectly acceptable for what we're going to be doing. So let's get down to it. So the jars that I've got here, unfortunately, I would usually just put it in one. I can't quite get everything I need into one of these, so I'm going to be using two. So my recipe, I'm just going to be dividing in half. And once more, we're going to be using 1 litre of gin to 450 grams of sloes to 225 grams of caster sugar. So the first thing you want to do is get the sloes in there. So I'm just going to measure these out first of all. Okay, got away there. That's spot on 250 grams. Unfortunately, there's no easy way of getting these in. The funnel I've got isn't big enough, so I'll have to do it the old-fashioned way and put them in one at a time. Okay, so there's 250 grams of sloes in each of these bottles. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the caster sugar in, and for this we're going to be using 113 grams. Okay, so that's the sloes in and the caster sugar. Last thing is the gin. We need to put in 500 millilitres in each, and a milliliter weighs a gram, so I find a good way of doing it, just putting some scales down, putting them on zero with a jar on top, resetting them, and then do it that way. Just put in, once that gets to 500 grams, you know that you'll have 500 millilitres of gin in there. So use the same funnel that you've been using before. Bang on 500. Last thing to do is put the tops on, give them a good shake. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shake these once every other day for a week, and then once a week for a couple of months. So around Christmas time, around mid-December to late December, what you should be able to do is is check them for the sweetness and see if they're ready. The longer you leave them, the sweeter they will become. And once you've left them and they're at the desired sweetness, all you need to do is just get some muslin cloth or some cheesecloth and strain them through, and you'll have this lovely, rich, clear liquid. Sloe gin, it's a really lovely thing, and especially at Christmas time, it makes a great gift idea for those people who are difficult to buy for. And it tastes fantastic, so, and it really fits in with the season. It's a great thing to do. Get out there, do some exercise, go foraging in your local woodland. The sloes are really abundant this time of year. You just got to beat everyone else to them. And the other thing is, with regard to this recipe, it is a recipe, and people have been drinking sloe gin since the 17th century. So although you can freestyle it, I wouldn't recommend it. I followed a recipe to the exact gram. There is another variation of this recipe where you almost use the rule of two. So you have 1 litre of gin divided by 2 for 500 millilitres of 500 grams of sloes, and then divide that by 2 for 225 grams. 250 grams of caster sugar. I use a slightly different variation where I use 1 litre to 450 to 225. So it's slightly different, but this is personally what I like, and I find works best for me. But have an experiment. You could even make one batch with using some measurements and another with another set of measurements, and find out which one you like the most. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and get out there and make some of this delicious drink. In November and December, autumn time, It's the most bountiful time of the year with regard to nuts, berries and mushrooms, so get out there and utilise all of those wonderful things. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.